Good morning. Welcome. My name is Peter Hilton. Today I'm going to tell you a story about developer happiness. If you want to know more about me, I have a website. If you follow me on Blue Sky, that will make me irrationally happy. So please do that. I want to make it a little interactive. I have some questions for you. So my first question is, please could you raise your hand? This is a baseline for who can do that. Okay, so if nobody does later, I'll know that that was deliberate. My first question is, who else does not speak Norwegian here? So a few people. Okay, well, you lucky people, this morning we have a brief Norwegian lesson. The first word you need to know in Norwegian is on the left in the first white circle. Fikse means fix. And in the context of this talk, fix is a very important word. In the middle, prioritere means prioritize. And it's got yeses in between. Yeah, prioritize. And on the right, fix det nå means fix it now. Now this is not mine. This was translated by my colleague Mina Taya. So thank you for that. The original is in a spicy spelling variation called Swedish. Do we have anybody from Sweden here? Okay. Oh, hi. Thank you. There is an English version, thankfully. This comes from Jasal Sundman in Stockholm, who made this infographic as a visualization of the simplest but ultimate bug management system. This is a bug management system in the sense of a way of handling bugs. So while I don't need to explain, so this means I don't really need to explain what is a zero bug policy. A zero bug policy is when you do this. You just fix bugs straight away, or you delete the bug report if you're not going to fix the bug straight away. And there is no third option. How hard could it be? I do need to clarify the naming here. I need to tell you what I mean when I say zero bug policy. Now, the notion of a zero bug policy, it can be controversial. I have been shouted at and called unprofessional for even suggesting that such a thing exists. My key claim for this presentation is that a zero bug policy exists and has worked at least once. I make no further claims. Actually, it's a target, not a policy. So nobody is saying, we have decided by policy that there shall be no bugs. That would obviously be ridiculous. It's more that, as a target, we work towards having zero open bugs. So zero bug policy is an inaccurate name for this system, for this bug management system that intends to achieve that target. But hey, naming things is hard. We all knew that. So nobody should be too upset about the name being not quite right. It's called what it's called. I have to start by introducing the context because, like everything in software development practice, it depends. This is also why I wanted to do this talk, because I believe that we need experience reports to tell us about things that actually happened, as well as the hype about things that might be possible in the future. So the context matters. I'm not talking about the whole industry. A lot of other people will tell you things as if that were true, but that's not ever going to be true. So as I said, it depends. And we need experience reports. Now, the first important part of the context is who did this, the people. The people come first, and this story is about a small, fully remote team distributed across many countries. Some of these people have still never met, still working on the team. But the first thing to notice is that this is a relatively small team, including 2 designers and a product manager. Now, in this story, I'm the product manager. I was a developer in the past, but for some years I've been working as a product manager. Not shown on the map is the CTO and the part-time Agile coach. They were participating sort of weekly, but they weren't day-to-day involved. The true heroes of this story are the developers. It's their glory. So next question. Toby sitting here did a talk about high-performing teams yesterday afternoon. Who was at that talk? Quite a few of you. Okay, so not a coincidence because this is maybe an adjacent topic. What is also not a coincidence is 7 of the people I've just mentioned worked for the same company as Toby did, where we learned a lot of those practices. So there is some overlap in the ideas here. I'm not going to talk about what we did, but there's lots of things that we did not do. No Scrum, no sprints, no daily stand-ups, no backlog, that kind of thing. Important part of the context. Okay, let's move on. The next part of the context is, what is the software that we were building? It's a web shop launched in autumn 23 for Norwegian consumers. They mostly buy things on their phones using VIPs for the Norwegians. Only a third of them use desktop, so it's really a mobile-focused thing. Hardly any of them use this English version of the website. I think this is pretty much just so the dev team can understand what it is. Although I now have this Norwegian vocabulary focused on soap products. I didn't get that from Duolingo. Now, the web shop is not the interesting part, because a web shop is kind of a solved problem, but because this is a circular service where you buy detergent, you use it up, you empty the container, you send it back, we clean the container, refill it, and then sell it again. This is a mission-driven sustainability single-use plastic waste reduction service. Now, circular supply chains are a new thing. We can't use any off-the-shelf software, so a lot of what we're doing is figuring out how to implement and build the IT for a circular supply chain. So that's where the difficult part, I guess, of what we do is. But this is in the context last year of a small startup, so 20 employees, mission-driven. This is small scale, so most of you will work for a much larger organization than this. You may work with multiple teams, so there is no other team here, it's just one group of people. We had a very clear goal that we were working towards. Everybody knew what we were trying to achieve. That's also easier in a smaller context. So translating this to a much larger organization, I don't know, maybe that's impossible, but this is our story. Next, I want to tell you about how we got started, because it turned out that getting started was as much of an effort, a project, as actually operating a zero-bug policy. Who's old enough to have heard of the Joel test? Very few people, which is kind of a good thing, because this is from 25 years ago, before blogs were invented. I mean, you'd call it a blog post now from Joel Spolsky. And the idea behind this test was to give people a checklist of questions to ask in their job interview to see if they're going to work for a good software company. And if they say no to more than 2 or 3 of these, then that would be bad and you probably don't want to work there. Now, at the time, all of us who were not at job interviews, we went through the list and we thought about our own employer. I mostly felt fairly good about most of these things. A couple of them seemed like ideas that we knew we probably should be doing, like usability testing. I mean, that's more common now than it was back then. But the one that we didn't all score a point on was, do you fix the bugs first before you do any other work? So we sort of ignored that one and we got most of the other points. So we got 10 points, but out of 12. This was my first introduction to this idea. And it was only years later that I read a blog post about the zero bug policy topic after I discovered the infographic on the first slide. So this is now 2021. It had come up in conversation a few times with colleagues, wouldn't it be great if, but we obviously can't. And so when I have these ideas of something we can't do, writing a blog post helps me get closure and move on to the day job. But I didn't completely forget about the idea. Now, let's fast forward to last year. All of the action in this story happened last year in 2024. In January, I didn't work for this company yet, but I had applied and I was in the interview process and I was chatting to the CTO, who, not coincidentally, was an ex-colleague of mine. He shared this blog post on our Slack channel, on the developer Slack channel, and it had come up in conversation in a retrospective. There was a team discussion in February about how this might be a good idea. And then the 1st of March last year was my first day at work, which happened to be the day of the week where there's a retrospective. So for us, that was every Friday morning, retro. And the topic came up, which was great because I thought it was a great idea. And I was very encouraged that the team were interested in this. Now, the timing was good for the team because everything was still quite experimental then. The consumer service had only been launched fairly recently, and it didn't completely work yet. And then in April, in end of March, the development team found out that in April there would be a marketing campaign with advertising on Norwegian television and on public transport in Oslo. And the web shop wasn't really ready, so the developers panicked a bit and complained that they should have got more notice about this marketing campaign. So teams should maybe talk to each other more. Generally a good idea. And lots of bug fixing started at that point to kind of try and be ready for the expected rush of traffic, which indeed did come. That's the context of having painful bugs, because despite those couple of weeks of frantic bug fixing, as soon as traffic went 10 times, we got a lot more bug reports every day. And this is the firefighting mode where dealing with the bugs channel in Slack and talking to customer support was daily work. It involved me as product manager. It involved the developers who are trying to figure out what's going on. And it was stopping us moving forward. So we were struggling to keep track of what was broken. Customer support needed to know what to tell customers. We're having to discuss the bugs, and discussions about bugs does not spark joy. Meetings about bugs do not spark joy. This is not a happy place as a development team. For those of you thinking about product management, this isn't really the context, but this is my context as a product manager. You can't do experiments if the lab is broken. So if I want to do a product experiment, I want to see what will make people buy more stuff or help them use the website better, and it just doesn't work and they get error messages, then I'm not conducting my experiment. I'm just getting a negative result because it doesn't work. So this was also one of my motivations to really focus on this problem. There are other perspectives also on fixing things, working on technical debt. So I found this on social media. And he says, we could see refactoring as a socially acceptable way of saying, of expressing our love for our colleagues, of expressing appreciation. Sometimes given our hesitancy to talk to each other, this maybe is a good thing. Now, we do have we value sharing appreciations for people. I highly recommend also having a Slack channel, literally called Appreciations, where you can share that you appreciate what somebody's doing. If that's a bit too close and personal for you, you could maybe refactor somebody's code for them to do the same thing. And so this was also a new angle for me, that this might actually be an act of appreciation within the team to fix things and to make the software better. I'd not thought of that before. I particularly like here the what if question, because at this point we were still thinking, what if there is a better world where we fix these bugs? Now, the next thing that happened is the discussions with the development team went very deep down rabbit holes. Developers are highly trained to find edge cases and ask questions about edge cases. There were all sorts of what-if questions that emerged. Elaborate scenarios. What if on a Monday morning a bug is reported and something happened on Friday and something else happens the next day? And this led us into discussions that were going around in circles, and we could answer these things. So, okay, so we have some existing bugs, so we'll fix those first. What if a bug takes a really long time to fix? Well, I guess we learned something, so that's good. What if we have a bug that doesn't affect customers? Like, what if nobody cares? Well, maybe we care and we still fix it. What if it still takes a long more time after it took a long more time to start with? Well, maybe we should not fix it or reevaluate whether we're working on this at all. If you have a bug backlog, you have to prioritize them. But we had a clear mission. We knew what we were trying to achieve. We wanted to sell things to customers, so we could prioritize bugs. What if there's a critical bug? What if like the web shop is down? Then I guess we'll interrupt what everybody's doing and work on that. So We could answer these kind of questions hypothetically, but these discussions were not really moving us forward. At this point, as a product manager, I started thinking about, well, what are our goals here? What do we want? Maybe that will help us, get some direction and start moving forwards. So indeed, we wanted predictable support effort. We didn't want to start work every day not knowing how much drama there would be in the bugs channel on Slack. We didn't want to have meetings about bugs. We didn't want to spend time on anything to do with bugs because, like I said, that kind of work does not spark joy. And perhaps most importantly, we wanted a good developer experience, developer happiness. Over the course of my career, user experience has become a thing, and that's great. It is also time for developer experience, which Toby mentioned yesterday. Developers are people too, so let's have a good developer experience. Like, that should not be a controversial statement. That should be a self-evident truth, that developer experience, a good developer experience, is valuable. Ultimately, given this direction, these goals, we realized that we had to do an experiment to give it a try, to try it out. To do an experiment, it had to feel like it was safe to try. So all we needed to resolve were not the what-if questions. All we had to resolve before starting was, why do we not feel comfortable starting? And that was easier to address. So we talked about what we would do to make this safe, and we adopted a zero bug policy and started fixing bugs. That was on the 1st of May last year. So next up, we have this work to do. Like, now we've been talking about it for a few months at this point while doing our other work and fixing some bugs. Now it was actually time to start doing it. The previous steps, getting started, was complicated. There were lots of discussions, lots of questions. It became much simpler once we had this plan because the infographic at the start is very simple. It's, you fix the bug. There is no step two, really. That's what you do. But this was quite hard work. So what I want to do next is give you some kind of idea about what it was like doing this work and how much work there was, and crucially, for how long. Now, I had high hopes that this would be a really cool moment to show a burn-up chart, but this is not a very interesting chart. It just kind of shows a number of reported bugs, the top line, and then a number of fixes chasing that line and eventually reaching it. So, spoiler, there's a happy ending, is that we did finally catch up with the bugs that have been reported. I think the only other thing that is useful about this chart is to notice that this is over the course of a calendar year, last year, but also that although we started with a low number of bugs reported, we fixed a lot during the year. So the number is 250-something bugs over the course of the year with 6 developers, well, 5 developers really. 1 developer was focused on DevOps work. The takeaway here is that fixing bugs causes bug reports. It's slightly controversial until you experience it, and then it's obvious. People don't report bugs if there's no point. Nobody enjoys creating a bug report. But if all of the previous bug reports got fixed, then creating a bug report is now an exciting, valuable thing to do because the bug you're reporting is probably going to get fixed. So once you start fixing things, everybody wakes up and starts writing bug reports. Also, the traffic spike in April and May led to a lot more customer feedback, more bug reports, and so there's this sort of steep period where we had a lot going on. Now, like I said, this is not the good visualization, so I tried something else. On this chart, the vertical bars are weeks, and it's the number of bugs we fixed in that calendar week. The blue line, as a rough idea, is the number of open bugs on the first day of the month. So that's not showing a fine-grained amount of bugs. I guess what this shows is that, well, we coincidentally started 1st of January with no open bugs. And that's not because we didn't have any, that's just because we weren't testing in a serious way. So we had QA issues, should not be a surprise. In April and May, we fixed a lot of bugs, and there were a couple of weeks where a lot of small stuff was resolved, but we kept at it. all through the year. It's quieter in August because people go on summer holiday. I have no idea what happened in May, where there's a week where nothing got fixed. That's unusual. Normally at least a few. The other takeaway here is that the scale on this chart is not very big. So the peak, the largest number of bugs fixed in 1 week is 18 or 19. The largest number of open bugs was about 16 at the start of a month. So this is not very big numbers at any given time. It just kind of went on for a long time. Now, I mentioned that we had this marketing campaign lasted for a couple of months, and that really gave us the motivation, the pain, but also the urgent need to not have bugs in the web shop. It's tragic if marketing's working and you're not converting them to orders because payment fails or something. So fixing that was very valuable, and that worked. So of course, this is what we prioritized and fixed first. So in this same period, we spent 2 months where there was no other work for the development team than fixing bugs. This was, for me, a new experience. I'd never done that before working on software teams, which I've done for many years. It was surprising in several ways. It was hard work. That is less of a surprise. But everybody, the team really kind of came together and worked on it together. That was a very positive experience. And I guess we can maybe all think of other examples of doing something that's hard and maybe unpleasant is a lot less bad if everybody's doing it and you know why. Assigning all of the bugs to one person would not have worked. That would have been horrible. That would have been unfair. But doing it together changes everything. Also, at this point, we had no idea how long this would last. So we didn't start this 2 months knowing that it would be 2 months. We thought it might be 2 weeks. But we checked in on a weekly basis. We talked about it in our retros. How does it feel? Is it going okay? Are we okay to keep going? Do we feel like this is worthwhile progress? And that's exactly what we did for 2 months. And after 2 months, that sort of became untenable. It was too hard. So we spent the next 2 months by reducing the bug fix to 50%, partly because it had become relentless and painful to only work on fixing bugs. The other reason is at this point, we'd fixed all of the serious bugs that affected customers, and we were left with lower impact bugs that we still wanted to fix, but which weren't stopping customers being successful at quite the same way. This meant we had other product opportunities to help customers be more successful. So in this period, it seemed that a bigger product opportunity would be to give customers another way to log into the app. So instead of using an SMS confirmation code, which is what we'd done at that point, we let them log in using a mobile app. So VIPs for the Norwegians lets you log into things, and that's a one-touch login that smoothed the experience for everybody. So implementing that seemed like a better opportunity than fixing some of the bugs, so we continued in parallel. We did not stop fixing the bugs. This was now more complicated. So the first 2 months was hard work, but very straightforward. Everybody knew what to do. When you start mixing two kinds of work, now we had to discuss, well, who's doing what should I do? Should I fix the bug or work on the login thing? And at one point, one of the team members in the retro in August said, 0 bugs policy pissed me off this week, as we're making our notes in the retro. I remember that this happened. I wrote it on the slide. Just by reading it, I knew exactly who would have said this. So a couple of months ago, we had a chat, and I said, do you remember what you were thinking when you wrote this in our retro notes, which I could still look up? And he explained that he'd been working on this new login feature, which seemed important and high impact, and he was deep into it, and it was going to be blocked if he wasn't working on it. But at that point, he needed to switch to fixing a bug because 0 bug policy. Then it just seemed to him like this was a bad moment to be working on the wrong thing, and the policy seemed wrong in that moment for him because anybody else could have fixed that bug, but he was the next person to be starting a new task. For me, this is an interesting kind of case, an interesting moment in this story, because that was a moment where the policy introduced friction and we didn't have enough flexibility. It was a moment where it was important to read the room and understand how the developers were feeling. And so this was, not a good thing that it happened. But also looking back, this is the only example of this kind of thing I could find. This was a one-off, so this wasn't happening every week. Mostly it was fine. So actually I'm quite comfortable that we found that boundary once and moved back from it and it didn't happen again. Now the other good news is that this edge case happened relatively late in this bug fixing process. Because what happened next is we got to what we were trying to achieve, which was zero bug day. So zero bug day at the end of August last summer was when we fixed the last open bug. And we never knew whether we would get there. So that was a big celebration. That was a really happy day because that is the day on which the zero bug policy actually started. All we'd been doing there was a transformation project up until that moment. Getting there was hard work, like I said, but things got easier there. The period from then onwards is what I call zero bug day is followed by zero bug policy success. So the title of this presentation is about the period when we had a baseline of zero bugs. Bugs would be reported, and we would fix them, and we would go back to zero bugs. Now, tantalizingly, that's not a huge amount of data towards the end of the year, and it's already May, so what you obviously want is more data. So this continues the chart from essentially from zero bug day until now, although I've not updated the last couple of weeks, so it's not until the middle of May, it's until a couple of weeks ago. The chart is on the same scale, vertically. The maximum number of bugs we fixed in 1 week was 10, but that is unusual. Generally, in each week, we fix 0, 1, 2, or 3 bugs. What's not really shown on this chart is how many bugs there are open, but it's 0, 1, or 2 bugs most of the time. There's one factor I should mention. We reduced development capacity from January, so there's less work overall, so that's partly why there's less red in the right-hand side of the chart. But what remains is 0 open bugs. This experience changed everything. When you don't have more than a few open bugs, you don't need to do the meetings, the discussions, or the prioritization. There is no prioritization discussion when there are 0 bugs because there's nothing to prioritize. If there's a bug report and you have an open bug, there is no prioritization discussion because there is only one bug. There is the bug. You don't even have to name it at this point because it's just the bug. Only if there are 2 at the same time do you even need to think about the prioritization. And if you have 2 developers who can both work on them, you still don't have to prioritize. So it was a very different experience when we have fewer open bugs than developers, because whenever a developer finishes the task they're working on and there's an open bug, then they work on that next. No discussion required. Sometimes reminders like, is it really that simple? And the answer was yes. So that made our lives a lot easier. That made the developer experience a lot better. And also, there were less critical or less serious, less impactful bugs in this period as well, because testing becomes easier when there are no bugs. If something breaks, you know exactly where to look because it's the only thing broken that we know about, and we know what we changed since the last time something was broken. So testing and debugging become easier. Now, one of the things that sometimes happen is you get a critical issue. So one of the questions that we talked about was, how many of these bugs were things that we should all drop everything for and fix, like customers can't give us money? That would be the quintessential critical issue. From the 12-month period from May to end of last month, fixing 161 bugs, 3 of those were critical. So only 3 times did we need to drop everything. Every other time, working on the bug waits until you've finished what you're working on now. No need to stress, no rush. When you get a critical bug, and it's been a few months, that's quite exciting. So not only does everybody drop everything, but we just swarm and we have a team programming session with the whole team until it's fixed, which then makes it get fixed really quickly. It turns out that you can't not do that on this kind of team, because if you say, well, two of us are going to kind of get into a Slack huddle and we're going to look at this bug together, everybody else gets immediate FOMO and wants to join the huddle. So the team programming kind of creates itself at that point. But the important takeaway, almost all of the time, you just work on the bug as the next thing on the backlog. The bugs are automatically at the top, if you like. Another analysis of the process is, did we fix the bugs or did we delete the bug report? So if you think back to the infographic at the start, you could, if you were not going to fix it now or you were not going to prioritize it, then you should delete the bug report. So how often did we do that? 9% of the time, it turns out. We almost always just fixed the bug. I looked at the reasons why we abandoned those 9%, which was, so 16 bugs over a year, and they were duplicates. It had been just reported by somebody else the previous day, or we decided that actually it wasn't something that was worth fixing or calling a bug. I mean, there were a few reasons, but mostly administrative. You know, we didn't really decide to accept some defect in the software as a matter of course. It's mostly that our reporting or management process was imperfect. So that's a kind of a weakness in the infographic. This suggests that you've got these two choices and they look kind of equally likely: fix the bug or delete the bug report. In fact, it's almost always fix the bug. So it's even simpler than that process makes it look. It's, you know, it's an edge case to not fix the bug. Another view is then, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? So I drew a calendar of last month, and on happy days, there were no open bugs for the whole day. The chart also shows the maximum number of open bugs on any given day, which was 1, because there were 2 bugs last month, 2 different kinds of bugs, hence the different emoji. We use the different emoji on Slack to, you know, once we know if it's unknown where it is, it's a front-end bug or a back-end bug. I guess we're cute like that. I'm a little bit sad that it took a week to fix the second one. I mean, that was just because people were away and it wasn't particularly critical and we weren't really focusing. I'm not proud of a lead time of a week. Generally, you know, bugs can be fixed in a day if we care. And it's the more that happens, the better. I think in that case, actually, the second bug was waiting for code review for 6 days. That's a topic from Toby's talk. That's not something I need to go into now, but I would love to fix that. If you've ever successfully stopped things being in review for multiple days, please come and talk to me afterwards and tell me how you did that. That would be great. I'm guessing that it's useful to share a little bit more context about how we work, because, as I said, what we're doing works for us, probably doesn't work for you. And there are various ingredients that were important for us. So I've mentioned a couple of times that we're using Slack, that we have a bugs Slack channel. Now, the bugs Slack channel is the kind of central inbox for all bug reports from anybody internally who has access to this channel. So if customer support sees something that doesn't look quite right, they post in this channel. Our goal here is to reduce the friction to reporting a potential bug, to make it as easy as possible to say something looks not quite right. We do not require well-formed bug reports from outside the development team. We don't need that because we're not being showered with bug reports. So we can take on all of the work of investigating and writing a good bug report. The way we do that is we take it in turns, like it's a chore that somebody's got to do. We don't always want to do it. So for a week at a time, the developer, the designer, or me as product manager will be the first responder. There's a Slack group called product support that has 1 person in it, changes each week. And that person will always respond as quickly as possible to a post in the bugs channel, figure out if this is really a bug. If necessary, ask a developer to look and see what's happening, write a bug report, link it back to the Slack channel. and then use these emoji on the first line. So the eyes are, okay, we're looking at it. The ticket is, we've created a bug report for this, and the green tick, this is now resolved in production. So a very low tech but straightforward way of sharing visibility. What we don't need is all stakeholders to be looking at our tracker. That's too much information for them. We use Notion for our tracker. Like, we don't have a complicated tool. We absolutely don't use Jira. And we report, as I said, the bug reports classified as unclassified bug, front-end bug, back-end bug, hence the different insect emoji. On our board, our kind of Kanban style board, we have a separate column called bug inbox. That makes it very obvious if there's something there. Most of the time it's empty and hidden, but if there's something there, we don't have to worry about the up next column being in the right order. Bugs just have a whole separate column that goes first. And something else that's important is that we have what I could call a kind of an air-gapped product feedback database. So I've got to explain what that means, because this is important. We get all kinds of product feedback from various stakeholders. Everybody has an idea daily about what would make the product better. Now, these are not feature requests. These are not bug reports. Sure, customers all the time think it should work a different way to the way it does. And in some worlds, that's a bug, maybe. But for me as a product manager, that's feedback. And I don't want any of that information, any of that valuable information in its raw form, must not pollute the development task management, task tracker, or the bug inbox. So the air gap is me as a product manager collecting in a separate database all feedback about the product, everything that people don't like, and deciding what we should actually work on. This is how we achieve a very short backlog. So at the bottom of the slide is a kind of screenshot of the top of our columns. And these are sort of typical numbers. They're very small, but ready for work, which is the up next column. That's our entire development backlog. It says 15 there, which is unusually big. I think we were transitioning onto a new project. Pretty much all the time, we have less than 10 things in our backlog. The bug inbox is typically 0, 1, or 2. And then we have things in progress and things in review. So that's roughly how we work. Takeaway here is, if you don't have very many bugs, you just do not need a bug tracker. And that's really good. So the tools become much less necessary. I mean, choosing tools is nice. It's fun. And I joined this company thinking, oh, I'm going to get to pick a tool, and there's things I want to try, and I don't want to use the previous ones. But I joined and it's just in Notion. I thought, well, that's fine for now. Let's really focus on the important things, the people and the customers, and later down the line we'll pick a tool. But later down the line I realized we just don't need anything more complicated. Like, even GitHub projects would be more than we need to do this. So there's a lot of benefit here from keeping things simple, because a simple situation allows a simple process allows simple tools, and this allows fewer meetings and developer happiness. Okay, time for more questions. So I'm hoping at this point that you've been thinking about how this story relates to your experience. And I hope you have lots of questions, because, as I said, my first goal for this presentation is to give you a data point that this existed for one team once. How many of you were in Barry O'Reilly's architecture talk yesterday? A few, not so many. Well, one of the things he said is he doesn't like case studies because they only give you one data point. They don't prove anything. But once upon a time, I was a mathematician. And in mathematics, a very important kind of proof is an existence proof. Because you can imagine concepts, like a zero bug policy. But just because you can imagine a thing doesn't mean that it really exists. So you have to do work to show that, your first bit of science is to show that this is a real thing that has existed. It doesn't have to be common. The first step is to show it exists. Many questions are irrelevant until you have done this. Hypothetical. So my first point was this existed, existence demonstration. My second question is, how much conversation can we start about this kind of topic? I want you to talk about why we can't all do this. I want you to have questions to discuss amongst yourselves with your teams, but I'm also interested in these questions. In discussions I've had over the last few months, several people have asked how I define bug. So who has that question? So few people that it's barely worth going into it. Okay, so I'm going to skip that. Not many. The short answer is we don't define it because we don't have to. You might call it vibe product management, where there's a bug report and are we going to fix it or not? If we're going to fix it, I might as well call it a bug. It's simpler. So there's no important thing going on here. Or as Nicholas Smith put it on social media, there are no bugs, there were just surprise features. So that's not a very important question if you're in a good place. If you're defining bugs, it's probably because that affects prioritization. You only need to do prioritization if you have lots of them, you have a backlog. So defining bugs is part of a prioritization game. The best thing to do there is to not have to play the game. What if we'd started with hundreds of open bugs? Now this, I'm not going to ask you because every developer I've ever met has experienced this at some point. Hopefully not in your current job, but I think realistically, I'm not going to ask you to put up your hand, but if we'd had 300 open bugs on day one, I'm not sure we could have started fixing them all. Like emotionally, that might have been too upsetting to contemplate. That's why there is a nuclear option. Who knows what the nuclear option is? You know, three of you. Too few of you know that the nuclear option is that you can just delete your whole backlog. That is a thing that you can do, I hope. I hope for you that that is a thing you could do. Now, this is an important thought experiment. Think, what would happen if on Monday morning you got to the office first and you deleted all of the bug reports? I do not mean close them, because they'll still be there and somebody can reopen them. I mean delete them, properly delete them. Okay, number one, would you get fired? That's important. Would somebody else get fired? Like the person you blamed it on because you used their laptop that they'd left unlocked? Would the project have some kind of problem at that point? Would you lose something important? If you've got 300 bug reports, some of them are months old, probably most of them. Nobody knows what they are anymore. All of them get duplicated every few months anyway as they get re-reported, and nobody bothers, remembering more than the last few months worth of bugs. So deleting the backlog sounds scary. That's why I use scary text. But in practice, it doesn't really change anything. Now, if you're being cautious, and let's say you use Jira, then my tip for you is to create a whole new project in Jira. Don't give anybody access. Move all of the bugs to that project and say you deleted them, and nobody will know. You could put them back, but that's just for your comfort. Okay. Is anybody thinking about what we tell the business stakeholders? Nobody. Really? Okay, a few of you maybe. So I didn't mean to shame you into putting your hand up. It's not so important on this story because I'm the business stakeholder. So my power move in tech was to become the business stakeholder after writing code. Fortunately, in my situation, the business stakeholders, kind of apart from me, they don't really want to discuss bug prioritization. I guess that is not their favorite topic either. Unsurprisingly, they want to talk about exciting things, exciting for them, like business strategy and customer needs. So that's the conversation to have. Talk about outcomes, talk about the problems that we will fix. So talk about customers can't pay us money. Don't talk about the bug in the order creation API call. They do not care. Are you worried that we're going to slip back into having lots of bugs and this was just some brief happy period that was a coincidence? Not so much. Okay, not so important. Well, I don't worry very much because it hasn't happened and it's been quite a long time now. So I worried a lot more 6 months ago. Today I'm quite relaxed about this. It seems to still work, so that's good. Who's thinking about refactoring or unit tests or other kinds of automated tests? Okay, a lot more of you. That's good. So I had to ask the developers because I sort of assumed that they were obviously increasing test coverage and doing good things like that. I asked last week. The good news is that absolutely was the answer. Much more test coverage. Fixing bugs involved increasing test coverage, creating the missing tests that allowed the bug to exist in the first place. And there was one area of the application that essentially needed re-architecting after kind of fully identifying a root cause. So there was some kind of checkout payment failure that was intermittent and complicated, but that was the only thing that came back several times as a bug. You know, and at the point where we had, why is checkout broken again? This is the fourth time in a couple of months. You know, then we have a more serious conversation than merely fix the latest symptom. And indeed, but otherwise, this idea that you get a bug report and ignore it, and then it would come back and you'd ignore it, and you would save up some big problem when you get disaster later, totally didn't happen. I mean, to be fair, we only deleted 9%, and if the 9% meant we deleted something important and then we deleted the next time it came up and again, that is pretty unlikely to have happened. So it's not a surprise that it didn't happen. Okay, so it's time to start wrapping up. What do I think we've learned here? The main thing that we learned first was that simple infographic is kind of a lie, or it's misleading in the sense that that's your end state. Like, that's what you can do once you've fixed all the bugs. If you have this huge number of unfixed bugs, or you don't test properly, even if you delete the backlog, they're still there in the software, and you're still going to get the bug reports, and you still need to kind of get through that. So that transition period was hard work. We had no idea how much work that would be. Amazingly, we got through it. I can't promise that would happen ever again, but the fact that that was possible, makes me feel very happy about our team. So yeah, I mentioned deleting them all. The most important takeaway overall is the experience when you generally have 0 bugs. There is only one bug at a time to talk about. And this is why, dealing with bugs case by case, one at a time, that is why you don't need process or definitions or prioritization. There is just one topic. If you're having a discussion about it, there is only one thing to talk about. And that makes everything simpler. Everything becomes easier there. Now, I've suggested that this might not be a universal truth for the whole industry, for you, for your teams. I guess there are various reasons why you probably can't do this. Now, I don't know anything about your teams, your software, or your organization. But generally in the industry, I would say maybe you're just not too upset about the bugs you have and you've learned to live with them. Maybe you can't, in practice, delete the backlog. That wouldn't work. Maybe you do think you would get fired, and that's why you're not going to do that. Maybe everybody's quite happy to release buggy software. I mean, there's a lot of buggy software out there in the world. As software developers, we see it every day. We see the bugs, we know why it's there. We sometimes even don't judge people for releasing buggy software because we do it too. So if that's you, then yeah, sure, you're not going to do this. You're not going to spend months fixing bugs, which was hard work. So that would be a reason for you to not do this. And a very common reason to not do this is that you would not be allowed to do it. So a lot of product people, and not me, and would say, no, you've got to build more features every week, every day. Features, 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 which is a trap. If you have somebody who says that, then there's a book that you can wish they'd read called Escaping the Build Trap for product managers, but there's probably no point giving it to them because they won't read it. I mean, you could try hitting them over the head with it, but no, I didn't mean that. Going back to the infographic, I also realized in hindsight, I learned a lot more about this after kind of working on this and getting to the point where we could do this. And I talked to Yasar Sunman about this because she's had a lot of experience of introducing this to teams and getting them to do it. And I realized, and she confessed, that indeed this is deliberately drawn to look cute and unthreatening with a cute bug, because that hides the fact that this is hard and challenging and difficult for people to embrace. So that's clever misdirection. The message there is that it's simple. I mean, this is the only time I'm going to use the A word today. This is progress in Agile software development. So the first time as a junior developer, a long time ago, that I drew our bug process, a colleague and I made a flowchart and we put it on the wall, and it was complicated. It was a lot more complicated than this. And that's how we thought about our bug process, that we liked that, it was all, we defined the rules and we'd clarified everything in this diagram and answered the question like good little programmers. Progress in Agile software development since then has taken away that process and replaced it with conversations. So the reason that this infographic can be simple is because each of these steps requires difficult conversations, sometimes awkward conversations. And so our progress in how we build software is that we are learning more that we need to have those conversations. We need to learn how to do them. And that's how we get the simpler process. As a famous Agile practitioner, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry said, it seems that perfection is attained not when there's nothing more to add, but when there is nothing more to take away. So my summary is that getting started requires the whole team. There is no one person who can make this happen anywhere in the organization. Our motivation was from immediate short-term pain. I discussed this also with Yasser Sunman, and I speculated that maybe you need psychological safety on the team to start fixing all the bugs. And her response was that in her experience, that's actually not true. If the pain of the bugs is enough, then people can get behind the project. And actually doing an exercise like this, spending a couple of months on a hard, challenging bit of work, is how you build psychological safety. The team got stronger for having done this together. There were a lot of questions and overthinking at the start that were going to prevent us from doing it, so we needed to understand why. I think that maybe helped, or maybe that's just my product manager brain. But clearly it was hard work to do this transition phase. But once we got there to 0 bugs for the first time, everything about our work got easier. It just feels easier since then. And we don't worry so much about bugs. And most days, we don't talk about them. So thank you very much. I've scheduled the slides to be posted on the Slack channel for room 7 on the NDC Slack. If you need coffee, it's a good time to escape, but I do have 8 minutes left for questions. So if you want to ask your questions, you're not shy, I'll take them now. If you're shy, come and see me in 10 minutes and we'll kind of chat out here. You're the first hand I saw. What's your question? You need to shout.
Yes, have you analyzed what was the cause of so many bugs?
Louder, please.
Have you analyzed, or have you been interested in analyzing why there are so many bugs in the first place? And what was the test coverage in that?
Okay, so the question was, why were there so many bugs in the first place and what was the test coverage? I think quite transparently there were so many bugs because QA wasn't very good. And so the background to this is that we had bad test coverage and now we have good test coverage. And we just hadn't worked on reliability. I mean, this is also a consequence of being early phase startup and launching the prototype in production. So we just hadn't fixed things yet or made things good. Next question from this side. Is there no questions? No questions, going. Okay, ask me afterwards. Thanks again for coming. I hope this has given you some things to talk about with your colleagues. Have a great rest of the day.